What do Joe Dispenza, Jordan Peterson, and music pedants have in common? Do they all secretly suffer from irritable bowel syndrome? Have they all been implicated in the extinction of a rare species of wombat? Sadly, no. But you get to try and guess before I tell you, and here are some hints. It is a particular, important, and attractive character trait that all three of the aforementioned people must shut down. Because today is all about the ways in which information is presented not only to kill inquiry, but also to divide us into in-groups and out-groups. Cool and uncool, informed, uninformed, on the ball, behind the times, and so on. Yes, ye old divide and conquer technique is not exclusive to politicians. It spans science, healthcare, pseudo-spiritualism, and those inescapable games of one-upmanship that you get trapped in at hipster parties. Today we're going to look at 3 dialogues, and all of them have the same aim, contain the same mechanism, and ensure the same outcome: alienation. And the death of today's incredibly important and attractive character trait. Now, if you're listening for the first time, I'm Jordan Rain, a philosophy graduate with a serious allergy to self-help gurus, and this is The Loneliness Industry, a philosophy podcast where we talk about the many, many ways that we are atomized by capitalism, its values, structures, and processes. Today, we're going to look at a process that encourages inquiry and the deepening of our understanding, when done well, and when driven by today's crucial trait. When done badly, or with power in mind, the same process substitutes inquiry for dogma, splits us into in and out groups, and becomes what Karl Jaspers calls unreason. That process is the scientific process, and its key human ingredient turns out to be key in any field or situation. Just a heads up, this is part 1 of a 2-part episode dealing with dogma. And today we're looking at mechanisms, both the useful and destructive in terms of deepening connection and understanding. Via today's 3 conversations, you'll learn how to spot one of these mechanisms, one that I'm calling the Faux Terminus. A fake ending designed to look like the last word when really it isn't, and is as deadly to connection and conversation as it is to the scientific process. In part 2, next week, we tour the arenas that flourish when inquiry is stalled. The so-called beauty industry, medicine, diet culture, self-help, and more. For today's journey, we're going to meet the music pedant, otherwise known as the gatekeeping authority of cool. Then we're going to meet the Western spiritualist, otherwise known as the holier-than-thou salesman. And lastly, we're going to meet, Jordan Peterson, otherwise known as the tool worshipper pushing to rescue a failing theory. And even though that last one might look more scientific than the rest, we will see today that what Jaspers refers to as unreason has rendered all things equal. Equally nonsensical, equally unscientific, and equally annoying. Let us welcome to the stage Dougal, the music pedant. Here is the style of conversation he is versed in.
I mean, she called herself a DJ, and she'd never even heard of distended labia and the fuck puppets.
Okay, bad.
Yeah. How can you pretend to be a DJ when you don't even know about Almudena Kovac's biggest side project, recorded entirely on a lawnmower?
Big influence on 9 Inch Nails?
9 Inch Nails. That is so mainstream. They essentially invented grindcore, man. Not Joe Average faux industrial.
Okay, yeah, important.
Yeah? Jesus. Are you even in this conversation?
Whether or not you have met one of the Dougals of this world, I have a question for you. Did it sound like an actual conversation to you? By that I mean, was it a genuine exchange of ideas, an enthusiasm for another's experiences and perspectives, or was it more about proving something? This non-conversation is our first example of what Karl Jaspers would likely have called unreason, exactly because today's star character trait is lacking. And if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to write in the comments at which point you guess what this particular character trait is. This mystery trait is required for developing ideas or theories together, and for having an interest in someone else's life, and for motivating us to understand things and others on a deeper level. So have you guessed yet? Here's another clue. Whilst Karl Jaspers may not actually have refused to date people who lack this trait, he still found it as much of a deal breaker as I do. He also lived not very far from me, in Heidelberg, but he died before I could find him on Tinder, which is very, very, very sad, seeing as we have so much in common. In case you haven't guessed yet, today's star character trait is curiosity, and Karl Jaspers considered it to be part of reason itself. He drew attention to the fact that curiosity is indispensable, not only for expanding understanding, but as the very motor on which that expansion of knowledge runs. Along with Thomas Kuhn, Adorno and others, Jaspers highlighted what happens when we lose our curiosity and slip into what he calls unreason. It goes like this. When curiosity dies, inquiry stops. Knowledge then starts to ossify into dogma. Yes, dogma, where coveted factoids are decoupled from context and used to divide and reject, or to sell shit, or to make the lives of other partygoers utterly, totally miserable. A quick example of what Jaspers was talking about, meaning curiosity being shut down and dogma resulting. We turn to Bishop Ussher. Now, his "the world began in 4004 BCE" idea started as actual curiosity. It was an attempt to reconcile history and scripture. However, once it was printed into Bibles in the 1700s, this calculation became untouchable. The curiosity was there to begin with, but once printed into scripture, questions like, where did the dinosaurs fit into all this, became heresy. Without inquiry, the idea hardened into creed. But wait, you may say, this is a podcast on loneliness. What does unreason have to do with loneliness? This. Unreason is death to connection, because it kills the very trait that is vital to connection, i.e. curiosity. It's not my favourite trait for no reason. Curiosity doesn't just drive us to deepen our understanding of the world, it drives us to want to understand others. Without genuine curiosity, we don't get to know one another. Instead, we do similar to what Dougal does, and vomit out facts in an attempt to try and impress or depress somebody else. Without curiosity, and let's not forget that we're living in the cult of the individual here, all we end up doing is trying to cultivate particular perceptions of us, trying to make others see us as cool or in the right or in the know. When we stop being curious about each other, parading and posturing is all that is left. On a larger general scale, this leads to the whole in-group, out-group thing, right? In the same way that music pedants can make you feel uncool on a personal level, feeling shit about yourself can be invoked on a societal level when unreason is going on. And this is all about the signs that it is going on. So, recognising a total lack of curiosity, i.e. unreason, is a very useful means of saving your self-esteem, your connections, and your sanity. And beyond that, unreason is what allows knowledge to crumble into dogma in ways that we cannot see unless we know what to look for. Because when money is involved, as it invariably is under capitalism, unreason gets better at hiding. Unreason is not averse to putting on a lab coat and saying things like studies have shown in order to convince you to buy the cure-all that everybody else is using, or even just to make you stop asking questions. All of this makes curiosity an antidote to unreason. It shows how vital asking questions actually is, even when everyone around you has stopped doing it, and all you can hear is them parroting the latest cure-all, health trend, or pop psych theory. This episode is for all of you who have ended up encountering a particular kind of catch-22, feeling even more outcast because of your search for more info, because of your search to make life more tolerable, less lonely, less exhausting, and less stigmatizing. It is for those of you who end up shut out by those who've shut themselves in, into trends, into performance, into the unreason of repeating what needs to be repeated to be considered in the right. This is for those of you doing your best with the tools on offer, only to find that those tools don't cover it, and that you get blamed for their inadequacy. Today, you'll get a tool that actually works and is free. We hone in on the Faux Terminus so that you can see when someone's headed into dogma. Thomas Kuhn is also going to help us discern the scientific from the unscientific and make you feel a whole lot less bad about being labelled the outsider, even if that means I'm going to have to spend time defining what a paradigm is. This episode is in praise of curiosity and in praise of the curious. It is also a warning about what happens when curiosity dies. Today, we look at how to shield yourself from the emergence of dogma, the profitable fog from which all holy grails emerge. Let's recall our music pedant tedium exchange, our first example of a conversation that isn't one. One potential sign that you're dealing with unreason is that it is annoying, tiresome, and ends with your making excuses to leave, such as the urgent need to vacuum your dog. But let's point out a more accurate picture of what's going on, of what Jaspers calls unreason. As mentioned, Jaspers considers curiosity and inquiry indispensable parts of reason. So taking them out of the picture means you're actually not using reason at all, even when you are spouting bits of knowledge. But curiosity also plays another role. It binds reason to knowledge. Curiosity is essentially, for Jaspers, the motor that drives the inquiry that is necessary to make knowledge the ever-developing, deepening, shifting, and recontextualizing thing it should be. Now you can tell from all that knowledge is not a fixed thing. So I want to give an example of the shifting, developing nature of knowledge and how vital it is to continually question our assumptions. Now, I'm a dog owner. Some of you guys are cat owners, dog owners, horse owners. And only 100 years ago, we thought that we knew that animals had no inner world. Now, behaviorism was becoming popular, and animals seemed to be these sort of meat machines that did thing X in response to stimulus Y. Now, if we'd left it at that, our understanding of animals would be pretty poor. It would not have deepened. Instead, though, new observations and a questioning of existing knowledge went on, and we realised stuff like, this cat is literally manipulating me into becoming its servant. It plans and adjusts its plans like some sort of evil genius. It must have an inner world. Fuck, am I glad it doesn't have opposable thumbs. Now, Adorno and Horkheimer also shared Jaspers' opinion about how critical curiosity is. No, not for killing manipulative cats, though there is killing involved in this warning. They suggest that capitalism works to kill off curiosity. Capitalism likes to settle on information that is marketable and that reproduces its own values. When you find stuff backed by science that seems to do what you need, you don't necessarily want to look further. It might destroy profits when new info means altering or reframing what we know and what we're selling. So curiosity can dry up pretty easily under capitalism, with no deepening, rethinking or reshaping of what we know, where we genuinely think we know it all already. And you can guess what happens then. A breeding ground for dogma opens up. Adorno and Horkheimer tip us off to the idea that we sometimes decide that we know enough because the factoid we just gleaned will help us sell something. Think of the cigarette ads from the 1940s, where doctors posed, puffing away, under slogans like, "More doctors smoke Camels." Back then, science had apparently confirmed that smoking calmed the nerves, aided digestion, and even helped with weight control. It was perfect, profitable, reassuring, and utterly untrue. When early research did begin linking smoking to cancer, the tobacco industry didn't wish to rethink very quickly. They doubled down, funding a new series of studies to keep the facts closer to where the money was. This doubling down is a behaviour that will come up again later today. In any case, for the tobacco industry, as for the sugar industry and others like it later on, curiosity had become an existential threat to profit. So now, from alienation to more alienation with a double bind. Let's look at how this decoupling of saleable facts from curiosity works using another everyday conversation. Now, our music pedant already showed us how factoids can be used to alienate. It was more subtle in terms of how real inquiry was absent, because there were a lot of facts being slung around. Not to facilitate inquiry, though. More as a dick slinging contest to see who is out and who is in. Next, though, we have a typical pseudo-spiritualist non-conversation.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? I mean, your thoughts can literally change your DNA. I mean, when you raise your vibration, your cells reprogram themselves. They've even showed this in studies. It's science.
Yeah, but I thought those studies were about gene expression in mice under stress. How can we tell that the relaxed ones eliminated stress with their thoughts?
I don't think that's the point, because, humans can change their thoughts, and when you do, you're not just healing trauma, you're altering your genetic destiny.
Okay, should I skip the chemo and buy a vision board?
Look, self-healing is science. It's proven. And I can tell from how you're talking that, your attitude really is the problem. So, you could dispense this course would be great for you. It really would. You're the prime candidate.
The shutting down of inquiry is clearer here, and additionally, it shows how grains of truth are decoupled from their context, robbing them of any contextual sense in order to sell stuff. Now, if this looks scientific to you, I am so sorry. It is sales patter in a lab coat. The actual research into stress biology has been hollowed out and repackaged as a miracle doctrine. You're not being invited to ask how we got from frightened rodents to curing cancer with vibes. Instead, inquiry is shut down with a move that turns out to be typical when dogmatism is involved, making you, personally, the problem. Now, Western spiritualism often takes this even further, as we talked about in episode 10 on Western spiritualism, and it labels you the problem and the evidence that their disembodied doctrine makes sense. Things like, see, you do have an attitude problem. Evidence that that's where your cancer comes from. Now, this issue goes beyond the terrible logic which we do get to in this episode. It's about being issued the end move of nothing more to see here before real questioning can even start. Now, this kind of stonewalling is necessary to prop up such dogma, because further scientific inquiry might show that regardless of whether we can change our thoughts about them, certain kinds of stresses do make you ill. Stressors like uranium, for example.
Interruption. If you are watching this on YouTube, this is my dog with his friend, because he's way more interesting to look at than my talking head. As you all know, podcasts need support in order to continue, and I'm sadly no exception to that, especially because I am a one-man show. So if you do find this podcast helpful, there are a ton of ways to support it. Some of them are free, some of them aren't. You can buy any of the 12 albums I released during my former music career on Bandcamp. You can buy art prints. You can support me on Patreon or by hitting join on the YouTube channel. The latter means you get extra content that no one else does, including lots of private life stuff. Head to www.thelonelinessindustry.net or jordanrain.com for more info on the art and music and donate options. And if you really want to support but you're skint, I get it. Believe me, I get it. Subscribing and writing a review on like iTunes or Spotify and things like that really, really helps too. So thank you very much for doing that. And to those of you who are already supporting, thank you so much. It means a huge amount, really, because knowing you value this enough to support it is what fuels the fire to continue. You guys rock. Thank you, and on with the podcast.
And yes, I did just say that Joe Dispenza isn't scientific. Feel free to rail against that, especially if you are in Joe Dispenza's target market, which is essentially men looking for meaning, but who are too terrified to seem flaky or too feminine, so he throws in physics. I'm counting on these comments to illustrate the structure of unreason that we're going to be teaching you to identify later on. So go for it, seriously. And before we get to why Jordan Peterson shows just as much unreason in action as Dr. Dispenza or music pedants, we need to dive deeper into something we often take for granted: what science actually is. Now, we tend to think of the scientific method as a clean, step-by-step process. Observe, hypothesize, test, conclude, publish. But Thomas Kuhn, in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, show that this neat procedure is not quite how things operate in the real world. There are other key elements that almost always go unseen. First, most science happens inside what he called a paradigm. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what that word even means, despite the fact that its popular use came from Kuhn's work. So let's start with an example of what a paradigm isn't. This comes from L'Oreal, who used the most hilarious pseudoscientific words like pro-collagen bioactives and micro-resurfacing peptides to market what is usually essentially face cream. And I find this kind of creative marketing, so hilarious that I invite you to post any similar faux science claptrap that you have come across in advertising. Please post it in the comments. In any case, at the time of recording, L'Oreal are literally using the phrase paradigm shift on their website to mean a change in marketing strategy from what they were using before to what they're calling now proactive beauty. They think it's a paradigm shift if you move from selling products professing to fix existing problems to selling products professing to fix problems you don't actually have yet. That's their proactive beauty thing. So, what a paradigm shift is not. It is not monetizing anxiety about the future when you were previously focused on monetizing anxiety in the present. When Thomas Kuhn talks about a paradigm, he is talking about a whole worldview, a framework that sets the rules of the game, what counts as knowledge, what questions are worth asking, what methods are valid, what counts as evidence, and even what answers are thinkable at all. It is therefore much larger and more important than rousing panic about wrinkles. And L'Oreal have not changed their worldview in any way. It still fits right inside the dominant capitalist paradigm with all of the control, comparison, and heteronormativity that entails. But back to actual science and not scientific-sounding word salad. A paradigm always has certain foundational assumptions that have long been considered accepted in that kind of, everyone already knows this kind of a way. We take these foundational assumptions more or less for granted, things like gravity behaving a certain way on Earth, or the atom being the smallest possible unit of matter. And when we do experiments, they happen kind of on top of these accepted foundations, meaning within the paradigm of what questions are relevant or askable based on what we think we already know and what results we consider comprehensible. As long as the paradigm holds, scientists do what Kuhn calls normal science. Within the current framework, they test details, patch small anomalies, and basically tidy up the existing worldview. But over time, anomalies can build up in the form of results that don't fit. Sometimes their lack of fit is because they just don't make sense at all in terms of what our underlying assumptions actually are. When that happens too often, curiosity starts pushing against the foundations. Scientists are forced to ask, maybe our basic assumptions aren't actually correct. We better check. Here's an example from Toruń in Poland, where I also once lived. Again, several hundred years too late to find this guy on Tinder. His name was Copernicus, another curiosity-loving dude. Back in the 16th century, he started getting some seriously weird results, considering the foundational belief of the time was that the sun revolved around the Earth. He asked a very risky question at this point. Does it really, though? Does the sun really revolve around the Earth if I'm getting these kinds of results? Priests and popes and so on did not like this question, which brings us to element 2 of what Kuhn draws our attention to. You don't have to be a priest or a pope or a Joe Dispenza enthusiast to hate the idea that you might be wrong. Everyone hates being wrong, but imagine how much more you would hate being wrong if you were the one who built the assumptions, or potentially worse, if your career, reputation, or power depended on them. Kuhn reminds us that it's human beings doing science, and that humans have egos and reputations and university chairs to protect. They're not always keen to say, maybe I was incorrect, or worst, maybe that thing I've built my entire career on and passed on to generations of students is total bullshit. And when power is involved on top, that reluctance becomes institutional. Back to what Copernicus cracked open. A century later, Galileo, who kept up with the annoying questions about the sun not revolving around the Earth, copped fury from the church. They were so allergic to the idea of being wrong and losing all their power because of it, that they waxed bloodthirsty and murdery with anyone continuing this line of inquiry. In short, they shut down inquiry. With death and guillotines. Much worse than the Faux Terminus that we're going to be dealing with today. Fast forward a few centuries. When markets are making money, a similar thing occurs. When people started asking about the link between sugar and disease risk, the sugar industry were not keen on this line of inquiry. And when evidence began to mount in the 1960s, they did not say, shit, sorry, our product might be harmful and addictive. No, instead, they steered attention and industry funding towards dietary fat as the bigger issue, the sort of nothing to see here, look there kind of mechanism for shutting down inquiry. Whether it's power, reputation, money, or tenure at stake, what happens, Kuhn shows us, is this. When question marks start popping up like syphilis sores on the face of a founding father theory, a kind of stuck phase sets in. The evidence that threatens the paradigm gets ignored or sidelined or written off. Now, the people pointing out these festering sores get dismissed and ridiculed, or, if they're unlucky enough to live a few hundred years ago, potentially put to death. Today, even in the absence of such obvious power structures, Kuhn shows us how it can take years of reputational bloodshed before the scientific community collectively sighs and says, okay, maybe we were wrong. Fuck it. Then, and only then, do things move. And foundational beliefs get properly re-examined. That is when an actual paradigm shift can happen if said foundational beliefs do turn out to be incorrect or inaccurate. Then what follows is a complete reframing of what counts as reality, a complete reframing of everything that we thought we knew, like when you find out that a syphilis-riddled imposter is not your real dad, and not like when you're convinced to worry about the number of wrinkles that your future self might have. I hope the difference is clear. Here is a more serious example, and a classic one, Newtonian physics. It worked beautifully for explaining motion on Earth and even for predicting planetary orbits. But as measurements became more precise, the numbers started getting a bit weird. Experiments and astronomical observations began giving results that didn't quite fit or really make sense. Now, the assumption behind those experiments was that space-time and motion behave the same everywhere, and that the same laws apply universally. But when science looked more closely, that assumption started to crack. Einstein came along and showed that space and time aren't fixed at all, and they bend and stretch with gravity and speed. He didn't just tweak Newton's formulas, he reworked the underlying premises, the bedrock. The framework of physics itself had to be overhauled. All this to say that whilst it can procure extremely helpful results and serve to deepen our understanding of the world, the scientific method isn't perfect. It is not an objective conveyor belt to truth, because it has people in it. It is a social process, and can therefore fall prey to forces with an interest in stopping curiosity. Forces like religion, politics, or marketeers who think inventing sciencey-sounding words will fool women into buying useless face putty. Point is this: even in the places where we don't expect it, like science, investigation gets shut down. Stuck phases happen, where anyone doubting the current paradigm or the theories that come out of it is shoved into an outgroup, labelled incompetent, uninformed, paranoid, or simply not worth talking to. They may linger in this outgroup for years, and may even lose their job or tenure. And the worst thing is, these kinds of patterns are not limited to scientists doing science. Because if even scientists can end up cornered into dogma, we're all subject to it. We're doing it when we shut others out for not agreeing with our pet theories or favourite diet or most prized self-help recommendations. We are doing it when we spout facts, not to encourage exchange or to get to know someone, but just to prove that we are cooler or more enlightened or even just more correct. Remember our non-conversations with the music pedant and the dispenser devotee. In each case, one person thought they had all the answers. When the other person had different ideas, the conversation got shut down. A final move was issued and a verdict was given. One person labelled the other stupid or unenlightened or not knowledgeable or simply not worth talking to. Same pattern. Unreason, shutting down inquiry, conversation, and connection. In the absence of curiosity, we will cherry-pick the factoids that serve our existing agendas, image projections, likes, dislikes, and biases. We no longer look at, or let anyone else look at, the paradigm that produced them, and if maybe that is flawed. Instead, we covet decontextualised fragments that support what we already think. Fuck context. End of story. That is dogma in action. But now to the good news. Yes, dear listeners, there are tools to help us spot this. Unreason leaves traces. Along with a few behavioural cues, there are telltale rhetorical devices that help us see when unreason is in play. That is where we're going to next, examining the signs that occur when someone is clutching pet factoids, intends to shut you out and block, block, block. Sign number 1, that cracks in a paradigm have started to show. That pustules are already oozing on a syphilitic face, but no one is ready to see them. Doubling down. We mentioned this before in non-conversation 2 with the dispenser enthusiast. This same pattern exists inside and outside scientific inquiry. Kuhn shows us that during stuck phases, when anomalies pile up but no one wants to admit it, science's practitioners also double down on protecting existing assumptions, rather than questioning or testing them. One safe way to do this, meaning one that doesn't draw attention to the theory being flawed, is to defend the tools that emerged from said theory, meaning like rulers, the metrics, the devices used to give those theories weight. So it's worth underscoring that the tools of inquiry are built inside the paradigm too. So when the paradigm starts to wobble, this is like a shift from using one's measuring sticks to defending them. This defence consists of reasserting accuracy as opposed to questioning irrelevance, as if confirming accuracy affirms the theory they were founded on. Now, Peterson is going to be a brilliant example of this that we will look at very soon, I promise. But first, a more amusing example, where we see that the accuracy of tools has zero to do with the accuracy of theory. Phrenology, everyone's favourite ludicrous 19th century science. Phrenology has become a kind of poster child for demonstrating just how dumbass, racist and sexist things that call themselves a science can actually be. In phrenology, practitioners measured skulls and lumps in your skull with gleaming brass calipers and took meticulous notes on every little lump and curve. The idea here was that the shape of your skull was directly related to your personality, intelligence, and character. And it does this with calipers and rulers, so very accurate. The assumptions, though, behind these accurate measurements, deranged, but because the data looked mathematical, it became the gospel of the time. It was also deemed to procure sufficient evidence that women were emotional, poor people were lazy, and colonised peoples were conveniently less evolved. Defending the accuracy of tools is a wonderful way to sidestep very flawed underlying theories. A more modern example for you, BMI, Body Mass Index. It was built in the 1800s by Quetelet in an attempt to describe, this word I'm going to pronounce terribly wrongly, le homo moyen, which means it was built to describe the average white European male, not to diagnose anyone. Later on, though, insurance and public health bodies adopted it to sort and price bodies for insurance, and average slid into being ideal. Clinically, though, the categories rest on population-level associations with risk, so mortality, diabetes, CVD, so on, not an individual-level causal threshold. Associations do not equal diagnosis. Key here is that the early reference body was the European male, and only later did researchers come up with data for other groups. In the case of women, the numbers were largely arrived at by men simply assuming what female values might be for the same height. The limits for other groups were revisited and tweaked, like lowering the threshold for Asiatic groups. But these tweaks and need for different cutoff points didn't turn BMI into a biologically universal yardstick. They showed that it wasn't one. And today, BMI is still used to police bodies, despite saying little about composition, fat distribution, hormones, or disease, especially for anyone who isn't the original average man. At the individual level, it's a weak proxy, and the thresholds were policy choices, not discoveries of nature. It survives because of how brilliantly it fits into capitalism's worldview. It promotes control, both in the form of self-regulation and authority figure regulation. It promotes comparison. It is profitable yet cheap in that governments and insurers get a tidy proxy, doctors get a quick authority, and industries get endless corrections to sell. It regulates because it moralizes deviation as failure. You are unhealthy because the numbers say so. So the tool remains a holy grail despite its inadequacy, and because it props up a worldview. It props up a paradigm no one wants to shift. Now, this very mechanism of tools being defended because power structures gain from it shows up in our third and final conversation, as does the rhetorical tool of shutting down inquiry with unreason. See if you can spot them now, because those two things are the telltale signs that dogma is incoming. We turn now to Jordan Peterson.
Now, I'm going to be paraphrasing how Peterson says this because the languaging he uses, it's just so deeply offensive that even paraphrasing can't get rid of it. But yeah, this is paraphrased.
Even if we don't like what they tell us, IQ tests aren't wrong. And that means we have to accept that certain groups, like people of colour, are less intelligent.
Wait. IQ tests were designed to measure performance within a narrow white Western schooling context. They don't account for structural disadvantage, chronic stress, or the fact that people who defined intelligence were white men in the first place.
Now, you might not like it, but IQ tests are one of psychology's greatest achievements. If you throw them out, you're throwing out all of psychology and everything it has accomplished.
Now, did you spot the faux terminus here? The hostage-taking move of, you have to agree, or you're dumb enough to go against the whole of psychology. We'll be delving right into the mechanics of that in a minute. But I want to point out too that the logic itself is flawed. Peterson is using a compositional fallacy. What's true of the part must be true of the whole. So it isn't logically valid, even if it might look that way to some. Question 2 is, did you spot how the defense of a tool, and I mean IQ tests, not Jordan Peterson, was used to defend the paradigm behind it too? A paradigm in which white privilege is subtly embedded. And a short aside here, because this particular kind of faux terminus, where it looks like it's logical, is particularly dangerous. It blinds us to all the other deep-seated issues in the theory and the paradigm itself. So, a reminder now of why IQ tests don't measure much that we can legitimately define, other than school performance and based on that potential future school performance. So this brief focus on content before we get to the faux terminus and how to recognise it. Because for a start, when building a tool, you have to agree on what the tool is meant to measure. Temperature, for example. Now, in the case of intelligence, there has never been any agreement on what it actually is. I'm not exaggerating here because it was a major survey done by Sternberg and Detterman in 1986. And they asked professionals across disciplines to define intelligence, and no two groups agreed. Now, this went beyond country and cultural differences in definition, which were huge already. But sticking to people in universities, no two groups agreed within the same universities. So the field basically ended where it started, measuring whatever skills happen to predict success in white Western schools. Now, another thing we need to know about tools too is when to throw them away. In scientific contexts, tools are developed with reference to theory, and a tool is deemed unfit when it stops giving results that make sense for that theory. For example, if the thermometer said it was freezing while we were sweating through our shirts, we wouldn't adjust reality to fit the reading. We'd throw the thermometer away. It's not doing its job. This example might not apply if you're going through perimenopause like I am. Generally speaking, we throw away tools that don't do their job. But Remembering what Kuhn said, we're human beings. Because we're humans, problems occur when a tool gives us readings that we want to hear, or readings that confirm what we already believe. Any astrology charlatan knows this. Dish out readings that say, you'll soon meet the love of your life, and you'll get great ratings. The point is, we are easily blinded to the fact that a tool might be measuring bias, not truth. And this is what psychology calls the confirmation bias. And just as Kuhn reminds us that scientists are prone to human frailty, Karl Popper points out quite directly that scientists are just as vulnerable to bias as everybody else. There are some seriously sexist, homophobic scientists out there, and yes, it does interfere with what they expect as valid results. And just because, I do find Jordan Peterson so odious, I want to make some quick notes on the scientific untenability of IQ racism. To claim that some ethnic group is inherently less intelligent hinges on the assumption that there are major genetic differences between those groups. But research by Leviton in 1972 showed the opposite. Around 80% of genetic variation occurs within ethnic groups and only 15% between them, meaning ethnicity can't explain differences in test performance. Now, recall that tools are built with reference to a theory, meaning that you have to constantly ask whether the results you are getting are reasonable or not. It would not be reasonable, for example, if a temperature measuring device showed Sweden is always warm and Poland is the only country with any temperature variation. We would know the tool is faulty. IQ is assumed to be innate. That is, it's a fixed quality. Now, if we're measuring something innate, we would not expect scores to rise under any circumstances, really. We wouldn't expect them to rise when people from excluded groups suddenly gain access to the same educational and cultural institutions. That's not innate anymore. It's contextual. It's correlated to opportunity. So it's not reasonable to expect innate abilities to show a rise or fall if the tool is sound. But speaking of expectations, what would we expect to see if a theory of intelligence was biased? Well, what we would expect to see that is if it was designed by culture A, we would expect that people from culture B, who weren't trained or rewarded in that system, would inevitably score lower. We would also expect that those within culture A who were marginalised because of, let's say, class, gender, disability or anything else, they would also perform worse. And that is exactly what happens with IQ testing. So, Peterson's readiness to defend a failing tool for dear career life at the expense of already disadvantaged groups isn't the sign of a curious guy wanting to enhance his understanding. He is doing exactly what we mention as sign one of incoming dogma. He is doubling down on a tool to defend the assumptions behind it. It is dogmatism in action. That he fails to see how variations based on ethnic group, gender, or access are signs that the tool is flawed and not actual confirmation of his worldview, well, that's racism in action. Now, what if you're still convinced? This is where we get to the structural part of recognizing unreason, because even when the context of unreason blinds you, and Peterson really manages to blind a lot of people, the structure can become your eyes instead. Because here is the thing. The structure of unreason goes beyond psychology or science. It can be seen every time an individual or group rallies around one thing as the answer, as a scientifically proven path to salvation. It can be seen every time you are shut out or shut down for asking why a holy grail didn't work in your case or in your friend's case. Because when evidence to the contrary exists, the dogmatic double down. They do not question their holy grail, and they do not allow questions about their holy grail, because industries or identities or in-groups have been built around it. And we come to my oft-stated point here. It is not your fault when you find yourself in an out-group for daring to ask questions. The blame belongs to those who would shut down curiosity, which can be anyone from Joe down the road to your healthcare provider to Jordan Peterson. So next, how to spot an unreasonable conversation. Finally, let's talk about what today's 3 completely unreasonable conversations have in common. It's all about the faux terminus. Peterson, dispenser enthusiasts and music pedants alike, along with a ton of commenters on forums, share the desire to shut down curiosity. They share it because whatever ideas they are peddling are designed to give them some advantage. In other words, this is about power and image, be that looking cooler than you, or being able to sell you something, or being able to look like an authority on a subject. Each maintains an upper hand by making it look like there's nothing more to discuss here, when actually there is. They maintain their power position by serving up a full stop. But a full stop that actually isn't one. It's a faux full stop, a faux ending, hence the faux terminus. Its function is shutting down inquiry, like Jaspers talks about, making the faux terminus a sign of unreason in action. Now, it just so happens that there are a number of ways to do a faux terminus, a fake ending. A lot of these particular ways already have names. Some of them are fancy names with Latin in them, which is why I chose to follow suit. Guys, I made this up because there isn't a word for it yet. There isn't a word that groups these things by function. And it is damn useful to know. It is damn useful to be able to name what's going on because that makes it easier to call out. So I'm going to be doing more on the faux terminus in another mini episode too, because I do think it's important and hopefully useful for others to use as well. In any case, this term, faux terminus, it groups rhetorical tactics by function. In this case, the function of preventing further inquiry. So let's look at how each of today's 3 non-conversations pull off a faux terminus. Now, Peterson's example is interesting because it uses something Kant would refer to as a paralogism. I'm going to do that's going to be more in the mini episode, okay? The faux terminus paralogism. For now, let's just look at the faux terminus, how Peterson's move operates. Peterson's faux terminus is a hostage-taking variety. It says, question this part of the whole and you have to throw out the whole. It's a rhetorical gun to the head, surrender your question or be accused of burning down the entire field. You will have seen this before when people say things like, if you question capitalism, you hate freedom. Or if you question gender norms, you hate men. Or even, if you question medicine, you're anti-science. Each one pretends that asking a question at all is treason to the whole. Now, Dispenser's faux terminus is typical of many Western spiritualist arguments. It consists of this double bind and an unfalsifiable premise. So just quickly, Popper suggests that if something is unfalsifiable, meaning you can't prove it or disprove it, it isn't science at all. Now, Dispenser and Western spiritualism have essentially this hidden premise that says any objection is diagnostic of the problem that I'm talking about. That's an unfalsifiable structure. The ending is baked in. Whatever you say becomes proof. If you get angry, that's evidence that you have something you need to forgive, and if you're sick, it's evidence of your negative attitude. So every objection loops back as proof that he's right. It's a conversational Mobius strip where curiosity dies of exhaustion. How about ye old bog average music pedant? Their faux terminus is much like those you see on online forums or beneath YouTube videos, including mine. It is a contempt terminus. You're not even in the conversation. You're too mainstream, too uninitiated. You're in some outgroup not worth talking to. There's also this kind of masked appeal to insider authority in there too, like only insiders count as knowers. In short, it's a gatekeeping move dressed as epistemology, and the terminus is an attempted status flex. Now, the list of ways to do a faux terminus goes on and gets very, very technical. So I'm going to do that in the mini episode. It's going to go through these in more detail, but a few more just briefly. And, let me know which ones you recognize. The music pedant, that was an example kind of loosely related to the discrediting termini type of faux terminus, which, probably all of us have experienced. This is things like, you just think that because you're bitter, or a woman, or Chinese, or you just think that because you're 22. Arguably the most famous faux terminus of this particular kind, "You know nothing, Jon Snow." That is a discrediting termini. "You know nothing, Jon Snow." An argument ended, not because it is resolved, but because one party declares the other unworthy of discourse, though still worthy of having sex with in a mountain spring, oddly. Another online classic is the appeal to authority type of faux terminus. This comes up when you question someone's holy grail all the time. I got one in my comments section recently. So if you're someone who likes practicing, just scroll down under my videos and you'll hunt out examples, and maybe you can name the kind of faux terminus that is going on via commenting. Anyway, I had talked about how CBT is based on the false foundational belief of cognitive primacy, and someone used a great example of this appeal to authority faux terminus. They said, "But CBT is the gold standard." Yeah, it's the end of discussion. You know nothing, Jon Snow. There are similar variations to this, appeal to authority thing, like, ask any physicist, or, everyone knows that unless they've been living under a rock. The translation in each case is essentially, I can't personally build any kind of convincing argument, so I'm hereby informing you that someone smarter than me would. Yeah, and that's supposed to end inquiry or curiosity. I've got one more for you, because this is my favourite, because it's occasionally absolutely hilarious. It is called the non sequitur, and I get tons of these. Like, I'll be talking about how loneliness is structural, and someone will write, "Yes, but in 1867 Nietzsche said XYZ," which he probably did, but it's got nothing to do with anything, especially not what I've been talking about. But this faux terminus works because the person says something that that's clearly true, even though it has nothing to do with anything, and the trueness gets packaged as if it's ended the discussion. I mean, it kind of does work to end the discussion too, because it flummoxes you. Like, what would you say? Yes, there are 17 ingredients in rice crackers that make mice horny. We are playing a game of pluck the random facts out of our asses, aren't we? Yeah, that's the non sequiturs, like I said, can be really, really amusing. So see if you can spot any of those in the comments as well. In any case, whichever method lies behind it, a faux terminus is essentially stonewalling in fancy dress. Each one mimics the syntax of reason while amputating its soul, curiosity. Each says in different dialects, "Question time is over." And that is the function of the faux terminus. So, in the mini episode, I go much deeper into this thing, the faux terminus, and the faux terminus paralogism, which not only Jordan Peterson uses, but someone that I interviewed used a wonderful example of a faux terminus paralogism to make statements about the human condition. So you might be interested in that one, especially if you like, the more technical side of these things. I explained it more sort of conversationally here, but if you're into the nuts and bolts, check out the mini episode that's coming up. Whether or not, though, you listen to that episode, this starter kit should help you spot a faux terminus in the wild, however it is executed. It's a kind of identification kit, so 6 questions that you can ask yourself. And you can, I don't know if you want to walk around with this in your head, the 6 questions you can ask yourself. There's an acronym for them. Qualified curmudgeon tries vicarious people-pleasing. I'm only including that because a friend came up with it and I thought it was funny. Anyway, the first Q in this acronym is for question. What question just got banned? And someone says, are you even in this conversation? Or you need to dispense this book. What question just got banned? The next question, C, is for context. What context was stripped out? We can look at the dispenser conversation for that one with the rats and you can change your DNA with your thoughts. Question 3. Is a tool defending an assumption? Oh, no, I don't mean that. What a Freudian slip. Question 3 is a tool being defended instead of an assumption? I guess you guys can tell by now, I really don't like Jordan Peterson. Is a tool defending an assumption? Question 4. Are any of capitalism's key values being supported by this claim? For example, control, cognitive primacy, individualism, competition, comparison, heteronormativity. As I've mentioned in many videos, cognitive primacy is actually still core in a lot of the Western spiritualist doctrine, despite having been disproven. Question 5. Is dissent being pathologized or exiled here? You can look at both the dispenser and the Peterson argument for that one. Exiled is those who wish to dispense with psychology. Question 6. Does anyone profit if I stop asking questions? The dispenser conversation is a good example of that. However, Peterson's is as well, in terms of the hidden power structures with ethnic hierarchy and gender hierarchies that IQ tests enforce. And of course, if capitalism hasn't decoupled you from your own intuition yet, you might actually just feel when a faux terminus happens. You might feel it because it feels like a door being slammed in your face, and its closing makes you realise with a jolt that this person was never trying to get to know you, was never trying to discuss or connect in the first place. There was no curiosity there, and curiosity is the vital, living, breathing force behind connection and understanding, be that understanding each other or the wider world around us. Without curiosity, every conversation becomes a competition, a power game, or a performance, and sometimes all three at once. So, that's today's map. Curiosity is the motor of reason. Unreason is the choking of the engine, and the faux terminus is the neat little cork jammed in the fuel line. We met 3 versions of the same move. A contempt gatekeeper, the vibes in the lab coat salesman, and the tool defender with a hostage note. And we watched each of them do the same job for power. Stop questions, sort people, sell certainty. And why does all this belong in a podcast about loneliness? Because when curiosity dies, connection dies with it. The moment a conversation is turned into performance, a sale, or a verdict, you and I get moved from interlocutors to audiences, or worse, defendants. In that shift, we don't just lose information, we lose each other. Now, I want to talk about a couple more ways out, which I will be expanding on in the episode to follow. The way out isn't braver speech, it's being brave enough to ask questions. Whether that means asking questions about the premises of an argument, or questions about the hopes and dreams of the person you're trying to get to know. And when you feel that sudden door slam, when you get shut out or shut down, use the questions we covered today. What question just got banned? What context was stripped out? What tool is being defended instead of an assumption? Which values of the dominant paradigm are being smuggled in? Who got pathologized or exiled for asking? And who profits when I stop questioning? If even one of those lights flashes, you're looking at a faux terminus, a fake full stop wearing a lab coat or a halo or a merch link. Name it, and the spell goes up in smoke. Curiosity gets air, and once curiosity is breathing, you can do the one thing that dogma can't survive. Converse, inquire, be interested in the person in front of you, not the performance around them. And before we go, a couple of things you can do if you find yourself in the midst of one of these conversations. You know, when someone slips into performing knowing rather than really pursuing knowing. To bring it back to that pursuing knowing, you can try these 2 things. Firstly, you can ask for a piece of missing context, like, what would change if we factored in thing X? The second thing you can do is offering curiosity in good faith yourself. Your curiosity is the antidote to unreason. You can say things like, here's what I still don't get, or can we poke at this thing to get them thinking? It's not going to fix capitalism. It will, however, refuse capitalism's favourite trick, which is turning dialogue into display. And refusing that trick, again and again, in kitchens, clinics, forums, or friendships, that's how we keep a public world alive enough to revive itself. Now, next week we're going to follow the money and the mirror, and we're going to track how holy grails in the health, beauty, fitness space smuggle in control, comparison, competition, and heteronormativity, even when there's no obvious checkout cart. So from intermittent fasting to gold standard metrics, we're going to see how the stuck phases that we talked about today are commercially fertile, and how faux termini police bodies, belonging, and gender roles. We'll use the faux terminus kit to test claims. We're going to spot the hostage notes and keep curiosity, rather than compliance, in charge. Until then, Keep your beautiful, magnetizing curiosity switched on. Keep your bullshit detector calibrated and your measuring sticks in the junk drawer where they belong. Thanks for listening. Bye.